On this episode of China Uncensored, how China spreads hate overseas. Hi, welcome to this episode of China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. You know, the Chinese Communist Party would like nothing more than to have all Chinese people living under its benevolent rule. But there's a problem. A lot of Chinese people don't live in China, so that puts them out of the reach of the Communist Party. Just kidding. In fact, there's a branch of the government dedicated to just, let's call it, extending the party's reach. The Overseas Chinese Affairs Office of the State Council, or as I like to call it, the Ministry of You Can Run, but You Can't Hide. I've often met people from mainland China now living in the US who just won't talk about certain issues. It's like, even though they're outside China, they're afraid someone's watching them. Turns out, there is. In fact, outside China, the party often uses so-called third-party groups who, on the surface, seem to be unaffiliated with Chinese authorities to keep an eye on overseas Chinese and spread the party's message. Here's an example. Loyal China Uncensored viewers know that recently there have been arrests and investigations of high-ranking members of former Chinese leader Jiang Zemin's faction like Zhou Yongkang. These are people who made their fortunes and amassed incredible power from Jiang's persecution of the Falun Gong spiritual practice. So now that they're gone, shouldn't things be getting better for Falun Gong? Well, it turns out, at least internationally, things are getting worse. This is what was going on in Taiwan earlier this month. Falun Gong practitioners being physically assaulted outside of Taipei 101. Yes, this is Taiwan, and yes, those are people waving the Communist Party's flag right in people's faces. No, literally. They call themselves the Concentric Patriotism Association of the Republic of China, even though they're waving the flag of the country that has vowed to conquer the Republic of China, aka Taiwan, by force if necessary. And when shouting slogans like, "Long live the Communist Party," and singing propaganda songs like, "There is no new China without the Communist Party," you've got to wonder who's funding these guys. They also were taking photos of Falun Gong founder Li Hongzhi and smacking it with a toilet plunger. These are adults. Maybe instead of using the plunger on pictures of Li Hongzhi, they should use it to clean up after all those mainland kids whose parents are letting them pee and poo everywhere. Now, this group has been active for years, but this is definitely a recent escalation. According to the association's constitution, their goal is the unification of Taiwan with the mainland, and apparently, Falun Gong practitioners are poisoning that relationship. The 10,000 students of the Sunflower Revolution who protested that Taiwan-China trade pact? Totally Falun Gong's fault. It's not just Taiwan that's seeing more anti-Falun Gong activity following the downfall of Zhou Yongkang. Things have been getting dicey right here in New York City. Since the official announcement that Zhou was under investigation, a group called the Chinese Anti-Cult World Alliance has been doggedly tagging Falun Gong activities in the city. So when I heard about this group, obviously my first thought was, I gotta check them out. Just a few feet away from where Falun Gong practitioners have set up booths to hand out flyers talking about the persecution they face in China, the Anti-Cult Alliance has set up their own booths to hand out flyers smearing Falun Gong. That guy gave me one in English, where I learned it's a bizarre cult and anyone who dabbles in Falun Gong nonsense automatically loses any claim to Italian heritage. What? And it's strange. No one would say why they were doing this. They were clear, though, that they were definitely not getting paid by anyone. Definitely not. So the Chinese Anti-Cult World Alliance is an extension of the Chinese Anti-Cult Association, which operates inside of China and is the public arm of the 610 office, the Gestapo-like organization set up by the party to eradicate Falun Gong. But because it's hard to extend the persecution to other countries through official channels, one of its members suggested that anti-cult organizations could be set up around the world on the local level that could be funded by the Chinese government through overseas businesses with ties to the regime. But these guys? Nah, they're not getting paid, even though their leader, Michael Chu, who lives in Queens, is pretty clear about his ties to the Chinese regime. For one, his business card says he's the director of the China Overseas Exchange Association, which is part of, wait for it, that Overseas Chinese Affairs Office. It also says he's VP of the New York Association for Peaceful Unification of China. That's a branch of the United Front Work Department and answers to the highest levels of the party leadership. Oh, did I mention both the Overseas Chinese Affairs Office and the United Front Work Department have been accused of foreign espionage? Hong Kong has their version too, the Hong Kong Youth Care Association, that has been extra active since rumors of Zhou's house arrest swirled at the beginning of this year. But they don't rub flags in people's faces, just their feet. And again, this all goes back to Zhou Yongkang. According to Amnesty International, in December 2007, Zhou delivered a speech about the need for social stability and that we must strike hard at hostile forces at home and abroad. One of those hostile foreign forces he mentioned was Falun Gong. A few months later, violent, large-scale anti-Falun Gong mobs went on a rampage in Flushing's New York, home of the World Anti-Cult Alliance. Very interesting. Sources in Flushing told the Epoch Times that Zhou even sent a Daring to Struggle award to one of the major players in the attacks. And here's the thing, right now, the last thing I would want is pictures of me accepting an award from Zhou Yongkang. He's going down, and everyone close to him is going along for the ride. For years, these kinds of groups have been getting funding from the Communist Party, and now their political patrons are being taken out. People on the wrong side of factional infighting in the Communist Party don't always have the longest lifespans. I think the surge in activity of these groups is them panicking. They want to make a big show that they're still loyal to the party in hopes that it will save their skin. But what they don't realize is that the very things they're doing in persecuting Falun Gong are going to be their own downfall. That's karma for you. Thanks for watching this episode of China Uncensored. Leave your comments below, subscribe, and share. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.